At 6, prepare for more flooding and higher temperatures as scientists warn climate change is already having an impact on the UK. Last year was one of Britain's warmest, wettest and sunniest years ever recorded.
Climate change isn't just something that's going to happen in 2050 or we need to worry about towards the end of the century. We are seeing this very clearly in our observations now.
Now, experts are calling for radical action to help prevent the worst consequences of climate change. Also tonight, more young people are urged to get the coronavirus vaccine as the latest data suggests the jabs have prevented around 60,000 deaths. 32 years after the Hillsborough disaster, a man who was caught in the crush in the stadium has died, making him the 97th victim of the tragedy. And there's no fairy tale comeback for Helen Glover, who was going for her third Olympic gold with teammate Polly Swan just 18 months after giving birth to twins.
And coming up on the BBC News channel, one half of the diving gold medal team, Matty Lee, has arrived home to a warm welcome. He tells us it still hasn't sunk in, but he's the Olympic champion.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. We've been experiencing some pretty extreme weather conditions over the last few weeks, from heat waves to flash flooding. And scientists say climate change is a major cause of that. Today, a landmark report from the Met Office confirmed that the impact of climate change is already being felt across the UK. And scientists are warning of the need to prepare for higher temperatures and more flooding. In the space of 30 years, the UK has become 0.9 degrees Celsius warmer and 6% wetter. 2020 was the third warmest, the fifth wettest, and the 8th sunniest year on record. The first time all three have been in the top 10 at the same time. Our science correspondent Rebecca Morell has this report.
The changes we're seeing are dramatic. This week's storms leading to flash flooding in the south of England.
Now the latest.
In Ilford in Essex, rainwater poured into Anisha's garden and garage, taking the family by surprise.
So we turned off the electricity in the garage. I tried making a barrier in the garage to stop more water coming in, but it didn't really help.
Tonight's
and
headlines.
Yeah, we were just worried about what to do because we've never experienced anything like this before.
These extremes are the focus of a new report that assessed the UK's climate in 2020. From the hottest day recorded in Heathrow, London, where temperatures reached 37.8 degrees, to the coldest in Braemar, Aberdeenshire, that hit a low of minus 10.3 degrees, to rain in October with the wettest day on record, and wind in the Isle of Wight, with gusts reaching over 100 miles an hour. The report says the UK is getting warmer, wetter and sunnier.
We can see very clearly from our observations that the UK's climate is already changing. So climate change isn't just something that's going to happen in 2050 or we need to worry about towards the end of the century. We are seeing this very clearly in our observations now.
The report compared the most recent 3 decades with the 30 years before. This map shows the UK is warming. The darker the red, the bigger the temperature increase, and everywhere is now hotter by an average of 0.9 degrees. But East Anglia and the East Midlands have warmed by more than 1 degree. This map shows the changes in average rainfall. Dark blue means more rain, and the UK is now an average of 6% wetter. But across much of Scotland, the increase is more than 10%.
It's putting immense strain on the UK's infrastructure. Extreme heat halting trains as tracks buckle. But scientists warn of worse to come, with future temperatures reaching over 40 degrees.
What's interesting about this report is there's lots of data in there. So there's lots of temperature records and percentage changes. But actually what we're seeing are the impacts to us as humans, to our businesses, to ecology across the UK. You know, it really is being played out in front of our eyes.
Come rain or shine, the world will be heading to Glasgow later this year for the United Nations Climate Summit. And we'll find out if governments can rise to the challenge of cutting emissions to stop the worst effects of climate change.
We need deep and rapid emissions reduction, that we also need to remove the excess greenhouse gases we've put into the atmosphere, which are creating these major problems today. And thirdly, we need to repair those parts of the climate system that have passed their tipping point.
Right now, the elements show no signs of letting up, and scientists will continue to track and analyse these events. But they warn that extremes are becoming the new normal.
And Rebecca is with me now. So a stark warning, and they are saying this is happening now. It's not something that is going to happen in decades to come.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think we're moving away from thinking of climate change as happening in the future to some far off, distant place. It's now, it's on our doorstep. And it's not just the UK. In the last few weeks, we've had extreme heat waves in Canada. We've had wildfires in Siberia, devastating floods in Europe, more flooding in China. We're seeing the effects of climate change everywhere. So what can we do about it? I mean, to some extent, these changes are already baked into the system. The greenhouse gases are already up there in the atmosphere. Global temperatures have risen. The air is holding more moisture. That means more rain. But we can do things to stop it getting worse. So there are individual changes that people can make, from decisions about what they eat to the transport they use, to whether they fly or not, for example. But really, this is going to require some bigger fundamental shifts. It's going to require phasing out fossil fuels, cutting greenhouse gases down to zero. And this is why the talks coming up in November in Glasgow are so important. World leaders coming together to discuss climate change. But scientists say we're past the point of promises and pledges. We need action. We need them to lay on the table exactly what it is every country needs to do to cut their emissions. And these are going to be big changes that affect all of us.
Rebecca Morell, thank you. And you can get more information on how climate change could affect where you live from our website. That's bbc.co.uk/news. England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Jonathan Van Tam, says he hopes the worst of the coronavirus pandemic is behind us, but he has warned there could be 1 or 2 bumpy periods ahead as autumn approaches. He has urged people who've not yet been vaccinated to come forward. The latest data from Public Health England suggests that COVID vaccines have prevented an estimated 22 million infections and 60,000 deaths in England alone. Here's our health correspondent, Sophie Hutchinson.
After the misery of many months with the pandemic, the thrill of the holidays. The NHS in England went to Thorpe Park today to encourage its younger visitors to get vaccinated.
Hi guys, we're doing COVID vaccines today.
I just want to be more safe and know that I'm okay. And also when everything's open now, so I can have more freedom.
Did you see that? There's something about being fearless when you're young. And perhaps that's what's being played out with the vaccinations. Unlike with the older generation who went full throttle to get immunised, a significant proportion of younger people are still dragging their feet over getting the jab and getting protected.
The numbers of those being immunised are continuing to rise, but there's a stark difference between the age groups. More than 30% of 18 to 29-year-olds in England still haven't had a single dose of the vaccine. Compare that to the over 60s, where 90% have now had 2 jabs. And today, the Deputy Chief Medical Officer was answering questions from young people on BBC News about the vaccine.
I was wondering, why would I or any other young person be inclined to get the vaccine for individual reasons?
The idea that COVID is less serious to the young is right, but the idea that it is not pretty serious indeed for some young people is sadly wrong. And then, of course, on top of that, there is the risk of long COVID.
In Northern Ireland, there's been enormous concern about what's been described as the incredibly slow uptake of vaccines by the under-30s. And in Glasgow, health officials have taken the jabs on a bus to Hampden Park, the national football stadium, in an attempt to persuade more younger people to get immunised.
I didn't really think that I needed it, but I suppose if you're going to need it for things like vaccine passports, I thought I might as well just get it.
Just was kind of waiting to see. I'm not, against it or anything like that. It was just a case of not yet.
But many have not been able to enjoy a day out. A record number, nearly 700,000, have been pinged by the NHS app, advising them to self-isolate. And for those young people who want to continue to go out, it seems increasingly likely that being double jabbed will be the key. Sophie Hutchinson, BBC News.
Well, the number of daily coronavirus cases has risen for the second day in a row after a week of falls. The latest government figures show there were 31,117 new cases in the latest 24-hour period, though that number is down on this time last week. There were, on average, 29,238 new cases per day in the past 7 days. 85 deaths were recorded in the last 24 hours, meaning an average of 71 deaths in the past week. The number of people in hospital with COVID has risen slightly again to 6,034. More than 88.4% of UK adults have now had their first jab, and more than 71.4% are now fully vaccinated. A 55-year-old man who suffered life-changing injuries after he was crushed in the crowd at Hillsborough in 1989 has died, making him the 97th victim of the tragedy. Andrew Devine was 22 when he went to watch Liverpool in the FA Cup semi-final against Nottingham Forest. He spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair. Our correspondent Danny Savage reports.
For 97 seconds today, Liverpool's players stood in silence. Their tribute to another fan whose life was cut short by the Hillsborough disaster. Andrew Devine died this week, more than 3 decades after sustaining crush injuries at that infamous football match, aged 22. His family said, "Our collective devastation is overwhelming, but so too is the realisation that we were blessed to have had Andrew with us for 32 years. For years, the chant from Liverpool fans was justice for the 96. This public pressure led to the Hillsborough inquest, which ruled the fans were unlawfully killed. For those involved in the campaign for justice, this is another sad milestone.
They've done, a lovely job of caring for him, looking after him for 32 years. And their carers as well who's looked after Andrew. They should be proud of themselves, but it's so sad that yet again we might have another victim on this memorial.
The Hillsborough Memorial lists every one of the 96 who died. That number has now, of course, risen to 97. Andrew Devine's name may now be added to this tragic register, if that's what his family wishes. The 2016 inquest into the deaths at this FA Cup semi-final ruled the fans were unlawfully killed. A coroner this week said Andrew Devine was also unlawfully killed, only that his injuries proved fatal so many years later. Liverpool Football Club said, "We have lost an incredible person, someone who showed us all what it is to fight and who refused to give in, even when the expectation was that he could fight no more." The message is that Andrew Devine will always be remembered by those at this club. Danny Savage, BBC News, Liverpool.
It's been a mixed day at the Tokyo Olympics for Team GB. There were medals in shooting and canoeing, but disappointment for one of the country's biggest rowing stars, Helen Glover, and her partner Polly Swan, who came fourth in the women's pair. It meant there was no fairy tale comeback for Helen Glover, who gave birth to twins last year. From Tokyo, here's our sports correspondent, Natalie Perks.
Is she going to be the first to claim an Olympic C1 title?
Her passion for paddling began at just 5. Today, it was time for Mallory Franklin to ride the biggest wave of nerves. This was a cracking run with just one small mistake.
And that is a fabulous performance.
And back at Lee Valley, where she trains, her family knew just how good it was.
Golden girl, here she goes.
Only her nemesis, the all-conquering Jess Fox, could now snatch the gold. Franklin's wait for her fate was a white-knuckle ride in itself.
It is going to Fox.
Happy tears from the Australian on the event's Olympic debut for women. But Franklin's great leap for silver was one great leap for women's sport.
It can mean so much for people, and I hope that people see One Women now as an event that's really high class. There was some amazing paddling out there.
So, silver success here then, but away from canoe slalom, it's been a day of hits and near misses for Team GB.
Nip and tuck, edge of the seat stuff.
Former rugby player Matt Coward Holly broke his back as a teenager, so turned his eye to trap shooting. He's won Olympic bronze at just 26.
Happy for him.
But there was to be no fairy tale finish for Helen Glover and Polly Swan in the women's pair. Glover's had 3 children since the last Olympics, and Swan is an NHS doctor. But the comeback medal didn't materialise. They finished 4th in Glover's last games, and she had this message for her children.
You can do anything you want to do. Trying and failing is no problem as long as you try.
5 strokes, there it is.
And how's this for a tight finish? Britain's lightweight women's double sculls were initially shown as joint 3rd, but they were later squeezed out of bronze by 1/100th of a second. It was Britain's 5th 4th place in the rowing.
Oh, no.
Whilst not often a spectator.
The biggest star in gymnastics wasn't defending her Olympic all-around title tonight for mental health reasons.
Big, powerful gymnast.
But in her absence, American teammate Sunisa Lee grabbed the opportunity to snatch the crown.
There is the new all-around champion.
16-year-old twins Jennifer and Jessica Gadarova were contesting their first Olympics. Jessica came 10th, Britain's best performance in this competition. Jennifer, 13th.
Good landing. Coming top 15 is just amazing, and doing it with Jess as well, like, I couldn't ask for more, really.
And if you've won only your country's 2nd Olympic gold in history, there are many ways to celebrate, but this is the most beautiful. Fiji, soothing our souls with a hymn called We Have Overcome, an Olympic metaphor if ever there was one. Natalie Perks, BBC News, Tokyo.
Meanwhile, more than 50 competitors and officials from the Australian Olympic athletics team briefly went into isolation in Tokyo over coronavirus fears. They were confined to their rooms for 2 hours after several came into contact with the US pole vaulter Sam Kendricks, a 2-time world champion who's tested positive and is now out of the Games. So, at the end of day 6 of the Games, Team GB remains 6th in the medals table with 5 golds and 18 medals overall. The time is coming up to 6:20, our top story this evening. Scientists say climate change is already having an impact on the UK with the prospect of more flooding and higher temperatures. And coming up after a golden week in the pool, we hear from British swimmer Tom Dean, who says his Olympic achievements have yet to sink in.
Coming up in Sports Day on the BBC News Channel, good news in the gymnastics with Team GB's Jessica Gadarova recording the best ever result by a British woman in an Olympic all-around final, finishing in 10th.
Thousands of women are made homeless every year across the UK. For many of them, it's because of domestic abuse, fleeing violent partners, often with their children. But a new report says the strong link between women being abused and ending up homeless is not talked about enough, and far more needs to be done to protect them. It says they should be given more help, for example, to stay in their home while their abuser is moved away. Our social affairs correspondent Michael Buchanan reports.
He wouldn't leave. He locked me in the house and was saying that I had to pay him money for me to escape, basically.
Among many instances of abuse, Leanna Fairfax was held hostage by a former partner.
I went back later that evening. All my clothes had been cut up. They'd been set on fire in the back garden. All my electricals had been put in the bath with water in. I just remember feeling extremely scared because I just didn't know where he was.
His behaviour led to Leanna and her young children being left homeless on 3 separate occasions, but instead of understanding, she was often blamed.
In my case, was often portrayed as a failure to parent, and that would be then reflected, for example, in social services notes as the children seemed untidy and unkempt. But that wasn't through fault of my own. Like I was asking for support. I was in a vulnerable place.
Too often, says today's report, the strong link between homelessness and violence isn't appreciated, with survivors of abuse continually treated as a problem.
Every woman that approaches a homelessness service, it should be in the back of the service's mind that this woman could have experienced some form of violence. I don't think that straight away they should be asked to record the details of that, because that's something that should be done when, you know, once there's a relationship there and once the woman feels safe.
One recent survivor of domestic violence told me of a common problem. The abuser remains in the home.
It would have been far easier for him to leave, but he didn't want to. And I didn't see any way or means for me to get him out.
The perpetrator's refusal to move left her with no option.
I put my boys in the car, I put my blankets in the car, and I drove as far as I could, because I just wanted to be somewhere where I felt we'd be safe.
And how about safety planning?
This Yorkshire charity resettles women from all over the country, providing safe accommodation and ongoing support.
All right, so do you want to register for housing in this area then?
Such good practice should be spread further afield after ministers in England announced new investment in helping domestic abuse survivors access women-only housing. Leanna Fairfax has rebuilt her life. The 32-year-old is about to start a PhD, her studies affording her a new perspective.
I was a victim of domestic violence, and regardless of whatever I might have done or whatever had happened, I didn't deserve this.
Michael Buchanan, BBC News.
The RNLI says it has been overwhelmed by a huge level of support following accusations that its work is assisting migrants. The lifeboat charity received more than £200,000 in donations in 24 hours after it posted pictures of the RNLI rescuing people crossing the Channel. Downing Street has praised its vital work. A national Holocaust memorial is to be built next to the Houses of Parliament. The proposals, which include 23 large bronze sculptures, were previously rejected by Westminster Council, but the government has ruled in favour of the plans. The Board of Deputies of British Jews said it was delighted. The BBC has announced that Jodie Whittaker is going to leave Doctor Who in the autumn of next year. The actor was the first female Doctor and has been playing the role since 2017. The bassist Dusty Hill, seen here on the left playing with his band ZZ Top, has died, aged 72. Known for his bushy beard and sunglasses, Dusty Hill played in the trio for more than 50 years, releasing 19 albums with hit singles such as Gimme All Your Lovin', Sleeping Bag and Viva Las Vegas. The number of people on furlough has fallen sharply to below 2 million, with younger people coming off the scheme twice as fast as any other age group. At the peak of the pandemic, nearly 9 million people were on furlough. At the end of June, it was down to 1.9. The scheme will be wound up by the end of September, and from next week, firms are being asked to make a much bigger contribution. Our Consumer Affairs correspondent Coletta Smith reports.
Leah Bailey has been able to spend a lot more time with little Ava than she was expecting.
Yay!
After maternity leave, she had 11 months on furlough. Then this April, she took a call from her manager.
She hit me with the news that I'm at risk of being made redundant. 2-3 weeks later, I got the phone call. I'm so sorry, Leah, but you're being made redundant. There's nothing. She said I tried my hardest to try and juggle people's jobs around in the office to kind of find your stuff, but there's just not enough work for the people in the office.
And that's hard when you'd been on furlough for so long, hoping and expecting to go back into work.
I burst out crying. It was really scary. I had a little girl to support, and I had a roof over our heads to do and bills to pay, and yeah, it was horrible.
How's it going now with the puppy?
Jo has been on the other end of those decisions throughout the pandemic. She runs this small promotions company in Stockport and says decisions around furlough have been really hard.
My team have been with me a long time. You know, most of them have worked for me for years. You know them very well. You know their family circumstances. You're trying to weigh up perhaps some of their financial circumstances. Who can you keep in, who can you not?
Because the business has changed so dramatically this year, to stay on top, Jo says she's had to let one person go.
We had a member of staff that had been with me a few years, but I really felt that it was an account management role, and I just felt that that wasn't what the business was going to need.
From next week, businesses are going to have to start paying more for every member of staff still not back at work. forcing many companies to start making those difficult choices. Today's figures show fewer people on furlough than ever before, with the real boost coming as hospitality and retail opened up again. But for the 1.9 million people still on furlough, the risk of redundancy is increasing.
Yes, Mummy's on your bike.
Leah has had an extra mountain to climb. Maternity leave and then furlough meant nearly 2 years out of the workplace. But after a couple of months searching, she's managed to find a new job.
It was just one of them things, you just have to do it, don't you? Especially when you've got children, you just have to get on with it, you have to do it, you have to be like strong for them.
Coletta Smith, BBC News in Rochdale.
Now, this was Maidenhead in Berkshire in the very early hours earlier this week. These are the friends and family of the British swimmer Tom Dean as he was going for gold. These images went viral on social media and show just how much the Olympics mean, not just to the athletes, but to everyone around them. And Tom did, of course, win not just one, but 2 gold medals at the Games, becoming the first British male swimmer in 113 years to get 2 at one Games. He's been talking to our sports editor, Dan Rowan, about his whirlwind past few days.
Tom Dean, you've just won the Olympic Games on the 200 metres freestyle.
Congratulations on everything that's happened in the last couple of days. How do you reflect on it now?
It's been a whirlwind, and even now it's not really sinking in. I woke up this morning, I looked at these 2 gold medals and I thought, you know, they're actually mine, so it's amazing.
Did you surprise yourself?
You can't go into it thinking you're not going to be able to do it, because then you've kind of written yourself off at that point already. So the 200, it was going to be tight. Luckily I got my hand on that wall first. 4/100th separating us both. I think, you know, it's really fingertip stuff.
I must ask you about the video of your family back home. It's gone viral, of course.
My mum's going crazy. Oh my God.
Who can you see there?
I can see all my family. I can see my neighbour. All my brothers and sisters. I could watch this video so many times, honestly. See, I thought, you know, being 1 or 2 neighbours or something like that, and I look and it's just, you know, it looked like half of Maidenhead were there. It was amazing. I always had a hunch that my mum would put on a big party. She loves putting on a big party, so and I think that shows how much it means to people back home.
I must ask you about COVID quickly, because a lot's been written about this recovery. How ill were you?
I think I was the first athlete in any Olympic sport within Great Britain to have a reinfection case.
Right.
You know, I'm coughing and wheezing, and I'm doing a sport that requires so heavily on your lungs and heart. I'm thinking, how am I going to be able to get back to the brutal training that it requires? But luckily, no long-lasting effects, and here I am, hopefully with it behind me for good.
This is wonderful. Duncan Scott, can you get the world record? It's gold to Great Britain. Well done, guys. Tom Dean is a double Olympic champion.
I mean, how wonderful was it to have that as well and to get a second?
Like a dream come true. The 4 guys I shared the podium with were, you know, the 4 best guys I could possibly imagine.
Swimming's right up there, very, very competitive. So this is a major achievement, right, by Britain?
This is it for us, and if we can put on a good show here, I think it's going to just bring up the sport within the country and get it into kind of the limelight a bit more, which is where it should be, and kind of bring it into the centre of people's focus, because, you know, Team GB and British swimming are here to stay.
Tom Dean there, what a week he has had. Time now for a look at the weather. Helen Willits, what have you got in store for us?
Oh, I'm not sure you're going to like this one, Sophie. I've got a named storm. So after all the heat and then the thunderstorms, now we've got an amber warning from the Met Office because of this rapidly deepening area of low pressure storm Avert. It's bearing down on the southwest and it is going to give quite a battering. And the concern is we have lots of people staycating, camping, in caravans. These sort of wind speeds more akin to autumn, but they could bring down trees, full leaf, and damage power lines, even bring them down. They're certainly going to give some disruptive conditions across. The Isles are still in Cornwall through the night, but many parts of the southwest of England, along with generally the southwest of the UK, will have quite a windy old night, a stormy night. We've had some sunshine ahead. We've still had a few thunderstorms up across the north, as you can see here. They'll start to fade away. But as well as the winds, and that's what the amber warning is for because of the strength of the winds, we are going to get quite a soaking as well through the night. And that's not limited to the southwest. That will be affecting many parts of England and Wales. So those gales escalating through the night, starting to ease their way eastwards as well, all around this, as I say, this storm system here. So wet and windy, whilst the storms further north tend to ease overnight. A bit of clouds holding our temperatures up, but with obviously all this going on in the south, it's not going to be a cold night. But it does mean a really unsettled day tomorrow. Even though the winds don't look as ferocious further east, there are still some yellow warnings out from the Met Office for some unseasonably windy weather, 40-50 mile-an-hour gusts of wind. They do start to ease off in the morning further south and west, but lots of rain, slow-moving bands of rain, showers, again with thunder and lightning in them and gusty winds too. Fewer across Scotland and Northern Ireland, but not exempt, as you can see, and a coolish breeze blowing in across northern Scotland, and that's a sign of things to come as we head into the weekend. So temperatures about 17 to 20, which is a little down on today in the south in particular, just because we've got more cloud and more wind. Into the evening and overnight, that storm system will blow itself out, moving out into the North Sea. But look at what's heading for the weekend. We've got this northerly breeze blowing, so cooler for the weekend, Sophie, but still some showers around. It's certainly not settled.
And it's nearly August. Helen, thank you. A reminder now of our main story this evening. A stark warning from scientists. A new report says climate change is already having an impact on the UK, with the prospect of more flooding and higher temperatures. That's all from the BBC News at 6. I'll be back with all the latest at 10, but now on BBC One, we can join the BBC's news teams where you are. Goodbye.